Welcome back, everyone, to Crime and Entertainment. I am Hollywood Wade, and I am here with a man that I am very stoked to have on the show. I first heard his story probably about 15 years ago, and after that, I bought his book, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. Now, this man smuggled in 75 tons of marijuana through two trips from Vietnam back over to the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce Mr. Brian O'Day. Brian, how are you?
Hey, how are you doing, Chip?
I'm good, man. Look, you've got a fantastic story. And for those that might not know a whole lot about it, today we're going to dive in and kind of let you tell that story. You have a book as well. We'll definitely let them know where they can get that book if they want to do a little bit more research on it. But man, what a story. I'm glad to have you. So
thank you.
Where do you want to start? Like, where did you grow up as a kid?
I grew up in a place called Newfoundland in Canada. It's the furthest, the easterlymost point in Canada. It's an island off the east coast. It's 105 miles off of the coast of Nova Scotia. And it's almost as big geographically, the province, as California, but it had 500,000 people spread out over 1,000 communities. So it was a really interesting and great place to grow up in many ways. And the moment I could get out of there, I got out of there.
Now, your family was actually pretty well off, from what I understand, right? I mean, you didn't work for much there?
Yeah, they were.
Okay.
Yeah, my dad had a couple of breweries and had his own political party with some other guys, and yeah, so they were, established in the province. Beer was a good business to be in.
It probably still is today, I think.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So as a kid, you went to the Catholic school, St. Bon's Catholic School, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Now, how old were you when you went to that school?
I went there. I started there when I was 11. I had been going to another school. In the province where I grew up, the public schools were controlled by the church denominations. So unlike in the United States, public schools are denomination free, no religion. Right. In Newfoundland, if you were born a Roman Catholic, you went to a Roman Catholic school. If you were born Church of England, you went to a Church of England school. Salvation Army, you went to a Salvation Army school. And that's how it was. And I went to St. Bon's. I went to a different school for the first few years, but when I was 11, my father that summer said, hey, this is your year. You're going to get to go to St. Bon's. And I wanted to do that because it was all boys, lots of hockey, lots of soccer, lots of sports. And where I was going prior to that was like a little private school, and that wasn't happening. And I wanted to go to St. Bon's.
Okay. Now, unfortunately, this is where some things happen that should never happen to anyone, let alone a child. You kind of want to gloss over that there. I mean, we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on it, but this, sure. We had spoken earlier. I think this kind of helps set the tone of, where your life began to go after.
Right. So the principal of the school sexually abused me. I won't get into the story, the rigmarole, but the bottom line is I was abused by the brother, the Irish Christian brother principal of the school. And it went on for just over a year, as far as I can recollect, as best as I can recollect. Being born a Catholic, growing up in a Catholic house, my uncle was a Jesuit priest, my aunt a nun, my parents involved in the church in a really big way. Heaven and hell was huge in a child's mind. And, I knew the moment I came out of my first encounter with that guy in his office that there was some God poised in the sky that was going to strike me down and send me to burn in hell forever. So for an 11-year-old kid, it's a very fucked up way to be thinking.
Absolutely.
And I could not shake that. And so when I discovered there were things I could put in my body that would change my mind, buddy, I was going for them. And, anything that changed my mind. I had no governor. I would try anything from that point on. And that's basically what happened. My mind was not a great place to be. And so my life became a quest to get out of my mind. My life became a quest to look for another moment, to never find in the moment that I was living in the gifts that it was full of, because I couldn't see.
Yeah. I mean, that's really powerful there. And we had spoken earlier, and I told you my wife is a school counselor, and she's often said that, you know, especially when unfortunate things like that happen to kids at a young age, it definitely plays a direction on which way they go. Sometimes people can correct it, but lots of times it leads down the roads that you're talking about with you here. So again, unfortunate situation, and I won't even get into what I hoped happened to that man later on down the road.
Buddy, that man showed up at both of my parents' funerals.
Get out of here.
He did.
Boy.
He showed up at my mother's wake. And that was a shocking experience, I got to tell you. But, you know, my good brother, my older brother, put his arm around the guy and said, let's get out of here, and took the guy out of there. But then he came back and at my father's funeral as well. I was doing the eulogy to my dad in his service, and I looked down into the audience, and there he was right in the middle of the audience. Couldn't believe it.
Shit. Yeah, it took everything I had not to dive over there. Man, that's nuts.
Crazy.
So at this point, like you said, you're starting to experiment with whatever, you know, like you said, could take your mind off things. Now, I'm actually researching a show right now. I'm doing one on George Young as well, about the hit movie Blow. I'm sure you've probably seen it before. Very similar.
I knew George.
You did? Okay. Now, did you guys talk or do business together, or how did that?
No, I met him at Chalice, which was a big pot show up in San Bernardino many years ago.
Okay. Okay. So he started out, you know, dealing pot as well. Then he graduated to coke, and stayed there. Now, you started out with pot as well. Is that kind of how you started in with the business, or?
Pot and hash.
Pot and hash.
And then I went to prison in 72. When I got out, I didn't have any money. And for a little guy, you know, the easiest way to kind of get a steak when you're on your own is to get a little cocaine, because a very small amount of coke was worth a whole lot more money than that size chunk of pot.
Right.
So I got in the coke business for a minute, just to get a steak, to get back in the pot game.
Now, did you met somebody in England with your first connect, right? Or is that, or?
Well, I had a friend of mine in Newfoundland.
Okay.
He had a band in Newfoundland at the time, but he was from England, and I was the manager of that band.
Okay.
And I was the guy who always had the dope. And one day he said to me, hey, you can get that a whole lot cheaper over in England than you can down here. So I was on a plane the next day, pretty much.
Now, coming back, you would have to go through like a customs portion of it or something like that, I'm sure.
Coming back into Newfoundland in through Gander, I remember the first time coming through, and I had my whole body was just strapped with this stinking hash. It was ridiculously stinky. And the guy at the customs officer who was coming through, he said, "You're John's son, aren't you?" And so, you know, it's such a small place, and they knew my family, and it was like a pass. You know, it's not that anyone was thinking I was carrying dope, you know, but there was no special attention paid to me other than, how's your father?
Yeah, you had the notoriety and you had the name, so it was just easy to just come on through type deal.
That's right.
Okay. So, and you said you had them all strapped to your body at that time. That's like pretty much everywhere. Leg. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it was much more lax those days flying around, especially as opposed to today, because good Lord,
there was no TSA.
No TSA. Okay.
You could, if you were leaving to go somewhere, I could walk you to the plane.
Okay.
And then I'd leave the airport.
Okay.
There was no security, none of that. It was only when that guy hijacked that plane and jumped out over Washington. What the heck was his name?
Talking about DB Cooper?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So it came after DB Cooper, and the borders really changed and became electronic and all of that after 9/11.
All right. What do you think about that case? Do you think he made it? You think DB made it?
You know, I don't know. I don't know. I think I read somewhere not so long ago that someone found money out there or something.
Yeah. A kid found, it was a family on vacation, and a kid found some money. He was out there with like a metal detector or something, just walking the beaches. And he found, I think it was like 5 or 10 grand, still bundled up, all together. But it was, the money was marked. Whenever they gave it to DB, they had all the serial numbers recorded. And so once the kid said he found it, they matched it to the numbers that gave him. Now, they never found any of the other money, or they never found him. So that's kind of the mystique around that case, is,
well,
not really sure if he made it.
The theory of that case is he was a straw man,
Yeah.
that the powers that be were looking to instill more security and install more security in the world and be able to monitor the movements of people better than they had been. So they create this false narrative, this incident that shows, we're going to need guards over there because look what this guy did. So, you know, I'm not necessarily a conspiracy theorist, but listen, I come from a place where I know enough of what's happened in my world to believe that's totally possible. Is it true? I don't know, but it's certainly possible.
Absolutely. That's been a long time running, I guess, theory, is that either something along those lines, or that the whole crew made up the entire thing and there never was a DB Cooper to begin with. That the crew, because the crew stayed on the board, they let the passengers go, and he kept like 3 or 4 of the crew, and that the crew just made the whole thing up, and there was never actually a DB Cooper. That's one that's been floating around out there.
You know, it's all possible. Listen, I'm a person who was offered an opportunity, me and my boys, to smuggle arms into Nicaragua for a certain group, and in return for which we could get access to a U.S. port, unfettered access, one time only. Wow. You know, what can they tell you? Who were those people?
Yeah.
Gosh, another time we brought a load in, and they wanted to put these people on the load over there in Southeast Asia. And we didn't want them on, and they said, you got to take them or you can't take the load. So we took these 2 people on. We didn't like these people. Was something that's wrong with them. We thought for sure this is not right. Anyway, at the last minute, we changed our offload situation completely. And we did something no one else knew about. We just made a quick call and changed everything. And 2 days later, we get a call saying, who the fuck do you think you are? You take our load? Your load? Fuck you. Who the fuck are you? And so they said, okay, who are we? Here's a phone number. Go anywhere in the world and call this number. We know that your brother is having lunch right now in London. If you don't go call this number within 24 hours, we know he's having lunch. This is where he's having lunch. He named the restaurant. This was my friend that I was with. And we'll kill him tomorrow. So we went and called this number the next day. We went to, there was a place in Los Angeles outside LA, Canaan Road exit. On the Canaan Road exit, this is before cell phones. In those days, there were like 100 payphones at this exit. Truckers would pull off there, and there were banks of payphones. So we went out there and called this number, and someone answered the phone, Langley. That's all they said, right? Langley, as if it was the CIA, because this is who they wanted us to believe that they were. Right. And my buddy said, yeah, right. Okay, give me, and he asked for this extension number. So he asked for the extension number. We got through, and the guy answered the phone. He said, oh, hey, Bill, hang on a second. Came back on the phone 2 minutes later. He said, the phone next to you is going to ring. Pick it up. The phone next to him started ringing, and he picked it up. And the guy's on the phone. He said, you believe me now, motherfucker? Now, here's what you need to do. And so what ended up from that is we took $3 million to the Sikh temple on Robertson Boulevard in Los Angeles, and left the money inside that temple as we were instructed to do. And that was that.
Wow.
So
that's crazy.
you know, they proved to me that they had powers greater than we did, whoever the heck they were.
Absolutely.
And when they suggested that they wanted some money from us, we were so anxious to get it for them.
Yeah, I believe I would be too. So now in 1972, you take your first pinch with narcotics. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was, well, so I was convicted for 2 pounds of hash that I never saw in my life. I never touched it. I never saw it. I wasn't connected to it. It was sent to a non-existent person to the house next door.
Man.
But they knew it was mine. It got stopped at customs, and they believed, because they knew where I lived, they knew who I was. I was like the first person in Newfoundland to bring marijuana to the province, and they didn't like it. Anyway, so what convicted me was they said they found a piece of paper in my apartment that had a number on it that was the same as the registration number on that package. That was bullshit. Yeah, I got 19 months.
19 months. Now, you didn't try to fight that charge or anything like that at the time? You just...
I did. I pleaded not guilty, but I got found guilty.
Oh, okay.
And it was that evidence of that number that primarily pulled the trigger.
Now, the prison you were in there, that was in the same town you lived in, right? So it's not like you had to go very far. Okay.
That was a prison that was built in the 1700s. It had no toilets, no running water. So you had shit buckets that were put in your cell, buckets with, you know, some disinfectant stuff in them, and jugs of water and a basin. And that's how that was. And every morning, you get in a line with all the prisoners as they empty your shit bucket down the hopper, as they call it.
Wow.
And the worst job in that joint was the hopper attendant. And they always gave that to someone who was in there for pot. Because in 1972, they thought it was an evil thing. Now, my father was in the booze business. The superintendent of the prison I was in, the warden, his brother worked for my father at that brewery, selling beer to fucking alcoholics. And this guy thought I was an evil guy. Wow. That's the world that we lived in.
That had to be a brutal 19 months for you there, I'll tell you that.
It was interesting.
Jeez. So you're released.
I got out of there and went right to Colombia.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was my next thing. I think you said you come out in 73?
Yeah.
73. And you go straight to Bogota.
I do. I had $500. I had a ticket. I had a name of a guy written on the back of a business card that said, hey, come to Colombia and get into real business. So I hopped on the plane and went down there and went to that restaurant where the address he gave me, and the restaurant was closed, boarded up, and not in business. And that was the only way I had to get a hold of this guy. I couldn't speak Spanish. I could speak French. And I thought, fuck it, I can, you know, between French and English, I'll figure out the Spanish thing. Sure I could figure it out, but it was nothing like I thought. And so here I am standing in front of this restaurant down in Bogota. All the windows are boarded up, and behind the restaurant is a little building with smoke coming out of the chimney. So I start shaking this giant gate and screaming, and this little old man who's 110 comes up out of the building and comes to the gate and asks me what I want. And I can't speak Spanish, but I said, do you know Benny so-and-so? And he's going, I don't know, entiendo nada, I no comprendo. So I said, okay. I wrote my name and my hotel that I was staying at, and my room number. If you see Benny, right? Gave him the card. Oh. I was devastated. So I went back to my hotel. I walked back across town. You know, it's a 10-mile walk. It was 9,000 feet in the high elevation, and I get the worst sunburn I've ever gotten in my life. Anyway, I'm back at the hotel. I'm watching Bonanza in Spanish on television, and a knock comes on the door. So I get up and open the door, and there's this little guy standing there. He's probably, you know, I was 20 something then. So he might have been 45, like an older guy. And he had on a sharkskin suit and tie, all slick, and a pencil mustache. And he had a crumpled up newspaper under his arm. And he's holding that card with my hotel and room number on it. He said, "You?" And I said, "Yeah." And he looked in the room and he motioned me to move in. And I went in the room and I closed the door behind him, and he looked around and he put his newspaper down on the desk, and I could see the butt end of a gun sticking out of the newspaper. So I'm going, what the fuck? Anyway, he couldn't speak Spanish. He couldn't speak English. I couldn't speak Spanish, but he made it clear that I just stay there and he'll be back. So the next day he showed up with a guy, a Colombian, who'd lived in Miami for years, spoke perfect English. So he said, Benny, the guy I was looking for, was busy off doing something for him and he could help me out. What was I thinking I wanted to do? And I said, well, a little negocio, a little business. I'm here to do some business. And his business was coke. And he said, how much money you got? And I said, I got $500. Man, those guys fell on the floor laughing, okay? They thought this was the craziest thing they'd ever fucking heard. Here is some gringo coming down here with $500 to do a coke deal. Anyway, he said, boy, you got the biggest balls of anyone I have ever fucking met. So I'm going to give you 50 grams of coke. I know you can take that back to Montreal or wherever you're going in Canada and get $5,000 for it at $100 a gram. So you go do that and come back and see me, and we're in business. So I took that 50 grams of coke and I got a pack of cigarettes. And cigarettes wrapped in cellophane, right?
Right.
I got a hot pin. I heated a pin, and you could open the cellophane without breaking the seal stamp. Open the bottom of it, take the cigarettes out, took the cigarettes out of the box. That 50 grams fit in there like 20 cigarettes. It was unbelievable. It was perfect. Just put it back in the cellophane, reseal the cellophane, and call the cab. Go to the airport. I'm leaving. I'm going back. And then they think, I can't do that. I made a mistake of taking a couple of little bumps, you see. So now I'm thinking, oh, that's the worst thing you can do, right? If you're in the dope smuggling business, you're not supposed to ever think. You make a decision, you don't think. So I ran downstairs, bought a carton of cigarettes, came back up to my room, and I opened the carton the same way, heated the pin and took a cigarette pack out of the middle of the carton, put that in, resealed it, put it back in the cellophane, headed to the airport. Halfway to the airport, I freak out. Rip open the carton, take the cigarette pack out, and put it in my pocket with a pack of cigarettes I happen to be smoking. Leaving Bogota Airport, I had no idea, but you have to go through Colombian immigration to get out of the country. So these two guys, after I'm going through, I see these two guys in jeans and short sleeve, Hawaiian shirts, and they're beckoning me to follow them. And I thought, wow, what a country. They're going to show me the way to the plane. Great. So we walk and I'm following them. And then all of a sudden I notice one of them gets behind me and another one's still in front of me. So I follow the one in front of me. We go down these stairs and we go into this doorway, and up above it, there's a sign that says DAS, Policia Judicial. It's like the Colombian federal cops, right? So I get in there, and they show me this card, and it's written in Spanish and English, an American flag and a Colombian flag. With the assistance in the United States government, we're looking for people who are dealing drugs, moving drugs, blah, 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 blah. You fit a profile, so you're it. And so they say you got to take off all your clothes and we're getting your bags off the plane. And I go fucking nuts. I got that coke right in my pocket right here, right? And I start going, I am a man. You two men want me to take my clothes off in front of you men. It's not fucking happening. And I did the whole macho thing, and they're apologetic, but it is going to happen. Next thing, my bags are down off the plane, and they're rifling through my bags. So rebelling all the way, I rip my clothes off dramatically, but I take my cigarettes out of my pocket and I put the coke cigarettes in my hand, and I put the cigarette pack, the Marlboros I'm smoking, on top of that one. And I pop it open, and I take a cigarette and light it. Now, this is 1973. People smoked wherever they fucking wanted. You smoked on the planes in those days, right? And I offered these guys who were making $30 a month. I know that. That's what the cops were getting paid then. Offer them each a cigarette, and each took it. And I'm complaining and lighting everyone's cigarettes and complaining and handing them my clothes like that and holding the cigarettes the entire time.
With the Coke up under the backpack of the cigarette.
With the Coke right there in my hand. And, you know, that's how I got through customs, that Coke. And I went back to Newfoundland, turned it into 10 grand because I cut it. And I went back down, and he took me back in the back and showed me what was in that little building back there that little old man came out of behind the restaurant. And it was a luggage factory. I went, fucking luggage factory? Well, sort of. American Tourister luggage with Coke filled on both sides, on the with the insides taken out, and then a sheet of aluminum put down over the top of the whole inside. Perfect. So he gave me one of those. Fucking right. Hopped to the airport, jumped on the plane, sitting next to a guy who was being deported from Colombia, who had a bottle of aguardiente, which is the national drink of Colombia. Right. And we drank it, he and I passed out. I woke up in the middle of Miami airport. The next thing I knew, swear to God, I'm like moving in a wheelchair. And I look like this, and I see a stripe on pants and a gun. And I got this suitcase on my lap with the Coke in it. And I look up, and it's a cop, and I say, what's going on? He said, I think it's about time you all got up and walked by yourself, sir. Buddy, I fucking jumped out of that wheelchair so quick and ran out of that airport.
Oh, man.
With that kilo of cocaine in my little suitcase. Yeah. Lost all my clothes, lost all my luggage, but got through.
You had the most important thing.
Yeah. So there it is. That's how I got going again.
So, I mean, and Coke at this time had to be at an all-time high, no pun intended. You had to be, what were you clearing per load right here when you were doing this?
Coke?
Yeah.
Oh, not much, you know, because you bring back a couple of keys and you make 20, 30 grand. It's nothing, you know, but you take that money and then that's what I did, and went and connected with pot guys and ended up with a boat and a plane. And
right. And that's what your plan was. You wanted to kind of transition off of Coke over to pot. And this is my assumption, but in the Coke, it was just a lot of more risks and a lot of death going on around those times. Is that kind of what led you to kind of go back to the pot? There wasn't quite as much heat with the pot.
It wasn't quite as much heat, and Coke was new then. It was all fun and games, you know. Mm-hmm. But it was such a fucking interfering substance, you know? It got in the way of everything you were trying to do, because it kept you up for a month or a week or whatever, right? And I was famous for 3-day runs, and I did a bunch of week runs, no sleep, just doing Coke. So, you know, it's a wicked partner. It beats the shit out of you on a daily basis. And it's a jealous partner. Doesn't let you have a relationship with anything or one else eventually. Yeah. But, you know, in the 80s, it seemed like a lot of fun. Hard to believe, huh? 70s and 80s, we were all out at every club every night, just snorting as much Coke as we could get down inside of us and partying like fucking crazy. And it went from that to doing it in a closet by myself, hiding out. Wow. That's where it goes.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank God it got taken from me, buddy.
Yes. So you build up some money with your Coke runs, and as you said, you transition over to pot and you buy a plane. Now, this first plane, I don't know if it's your first plane, but it's the plane story that I heard. It was pretty interesting. Your first plane ride that you had.
Well, we had a boat first, but then we got the plane. Yeah. The
Okay.
plane was crazy. I mean, this was an old troop carrying DC-6, 4-engine, 4-propeller engine, giant beast of a beautiful plane. But it had issues. We took off halfway down at the Columbia. It's a 10-hour flight in this thing. The pilot turns to me, and I'd never flown a plane before. I mean, I'd been on lots of planes and private planes and small planes sitting up front and lots of them, but I didn't have a license, didn't know how to fly. I've seen people fly hundreds of hours, but I didn't know how to do it. Anyway, I'm co-piloting with this guy, and he says, at a certain point, where would you prefer to crash, Colombia or the United States? I said, fucking nowhere. Nowhere. He said, well,
Either.
you can make a choice. Where would you choose? And I said, the United States. Crash in Colombia, if we live, we're done forever.
Yeah.
They're going to lock us up. It'll cost us $1 million to get out of jail. The U.S., we have some explaining to do, but there's nothing. It's just a plane. And it'll all be good. So the U.S., he said, okay, we got to turn around. And I said, what the fuck? So we had lost hydraulic pressure. And he was afraid that when he dropped the landing gear without any hydraulic pressure, we had a leak in the line, obviously, there wouldn't be enough pressure to lock our landing gear open.
Right.
So we would crash. Now, right behind the cockpit was a case of hydraulic fluid. So he said, we're going back. When we land, you got to go back there and just keep pouring fluid into the system. Hopefully there will be enough pressure with the fluid in the system to catch and lock the gear open. So we're going back. It's nighttime. Nobody's expecting us. It's in southern Georgia, Moultrie. So we have to find that. First of all, we got to find the thing before we lose all our fuel, because we got halfway there. We have enough fuel to get back. That's why we had to either keep going or go back right now.
Yeah.
So we turned around, we went back, and I said, Dick, I don't know how the fuck we are going to find the airport. No one's got any lights on, nothing. He said, we'll find it. So we flew up Central Florida and got in where we figured Moultrie was and started doing a circle and closing the circle. And buddy, within 10 minutes, we found the strip. We landed that plane, and I got back there and started pouring that fluid in, and fortunately, the gear locked open. So the next day, we got the plane fixed. While we were getting it fixed, the sheriff came out and said, wow, this looks like a smuggling rig to me, boys. And we had rented the airport, leased the airport in Moultrie under the guise of being an airplane repair company. And we leased this airport in this struggling town to bring business to the town. So we had a reputation of being the good guys who came to town to help get this airport going, fixing planes. So they didn't know we had anything to do with this plane. The sheriff just thought that we were preparing some smuggler's plane. Anyway, the next day we took off, and down to Colombia we went and made it all the way. And when we landed, we lost our nose gear steering. Ended up in a cactus field, went through barbed wire fence, wrapped the props in barbed wire, trying to get the plane out of there. We blew one of the motors, the props, everything off of the plane entirely. Nearly killed a guy. The army is there now with their hand out, and it's just like a big nightmare. Jeez. 6 days later, the plane's full. We take off with 3 engines, and we lose the second engine on the same side and went down in the ocean.
Jesus, so you basically just survived almost 3 plane crashes in about a 24-hour period.
That's right. And now we're in the ocean, jumping out of this plane, seeing, and it's dusk, and we could see these Indian fishermen in their boats over to the west from where we were. Excuse me. So our hope was that they would come towards us because they could see the plane going down for sure. And we started swimming in their direction. And sure enough, they picked us up. And we mentioned the name of the people that we were involved with on shore in the Wahira. And that name was the biggest name on the peninsula, and that took care of us.
All right,
Took me a
wow.
month, and I finally got out of there.
So, I mean, obviously, you guys lost the load that was on the plane.
16,000 pounds, yeah.
16,000. Wow.
Mhm.
That's never a good. Well, it's never a good thing to crash a plane for the third time in 24 hours either, but definitely not good to do it with 16.
Bummer all the way around. But it was, it was bummer all the way around, but to be alive after it all was pretty interesting.
Now, you probably had to be thinking was that daytime or nighttime when you went down in the Caribbean there?
That was dusk.
It was dusk. Yeah, you probably had to be thinking, as much as you've lived through already, that might be final notice time.
Nobody, we weren't thinking anything. You just fucking, you're not thinking. You're just going.
Just go.
Because if you think, you're going to stop. Because you have to stop to think, right?
Right.
But it just turns on every afterburner. If you're a guy who's constantly putting yourself out in front of things, you don't linger on shit like that, right? You just go with the purpose.
So these incidences here, they didn't deter you at all. It wasn't like, hey, maybe this is a sign I don't need to do this. It was just, I need a better plane type deal.
Yeah. Maybe I'll try a different vehicle. It doesn't fall so far from the sky.
Yeah, I know when I was reading George's book, when it got to the point where they wanted planes, they would actually just go and hang out at the airport and just steal them because there was no security. But he said the only drawback to doing that was you had no fucking idea about the mechanical history of the plane. So you might get it up there and realize something's wrong, and then you don't know the history of it. So that was kind of the drawback to the planes they were stealing.
It is. But, we kind of stole one in that we gave a guy a few $100,000 to look the other way at a graveyard. When we took the plane out of there.
All right. So it's around this time you get a phone call, right? That's kind of going to turn this business to some major moves. Is it around this time or is it a little later?
Some years later, but basically a lot of the same leading up to it, and eventually I was trying to get out of the business.
Right.
And I had some people who were giving me the money I needed. I had gathered up 30 tons of dinosaur bone, and I had reached a tentative deal with the National Geographic I was going to embed a piece of dinosaur bone in a pyramidal shaped piece of Lexan. And every subscriber to the National Geographic would get one of these. And I had it all figured out. It was, the deal was going to make us about 20 million, me and my friend Barry Levinson. And it looked good. And I had the guys, my connections to the pot in Southeast Asia were going to finance me to do it. I get a phone call from this guy who I had trouble with. This is a guy I grew up with in Newfoundland. And I had trouble with this guy. He brought some heavy to my house to break my legs at one point in my life.
Wow.
I managed to fix that, but this guy was not a good guy. And I didn't fucking trust him, and I didn't like him. And if he found himself under my car, I never would have been disappointed. However, he called me and he just said, I know we've had trouble. I got the offload of a lifetime. I have the best offload in the history of pot smuggling. You got to come and take a fucking look. And I said, I'm in the midst of something. I know. He kept bugging me. He said, do me a favor, because he knew my guys. He knew who the people were that I was connected with. He knew them, the guys who had the connections, but he couldn't call them. And he said, just tell them, just mention it to them and let them make the call. I said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. Once only. Couldn't help myself. This is a guy I should have walked the other way the moment he called me and never took his call or talked to him. I said, I'll just tell him once. Whatever happens, happens. So I had a meeting with the guys. And at the end of the meeting, they were leaving, and I forgot to mention it. And as they were going down the driveway, I went, oh, shit. So I chased the car down the driveway and stopped them and said, hey, I got this guy, you know, I was in business with him years ago. He's not a nice guy. I don't like the fucking guy, but he's in the business. And he says he's got the absolute best offload in the history of this game on the West Coast for a Southeast Asia run. So if you're interested, we can go take a look. And they said, let's fucking go get a plane and go up there. So that day, we went and rented a plane and flew up to Washington. The guy picked us up, drove us up to Anacortes, showed us the offload. Unbelievable. I mean, nothing like it in the world. Totally isolated, a whole dry dock situation, deep water port, unbelievable. Privately owned by a family of fishermen who were going to be our boating people. Oh my God, it was just
perfect.
The dinosaur bone deal went out the window. So we put together this deal. And there were 110 of us in our crew all over the world. And so how do you keep a crew like that alive? You keep a crew like that alive by having a few rules and regulations that every single person in the group sticks to. And here was the one rule and regulation our crew had: no cocaine. Any cocaine and you are out. So I got introduced to this family up in Washington who had this fishing business, and they'd been in the business for years, and they were mockers on the West Coast. Everybody up and down from Alaska to Washington knew this family, knew these fishermen. They were amazing people. Everybody loved them. And this was the connection that the guy I knew brought me to. And so it just looked like this is an amazing opportunity. So I brought in, because I didn't know any of these guys, I brought in an old friend of mine from Cleveland who was an engineer. And he knew from boilers, from machinery, from hotel plants, from giant Cummins diesels. He knew this stuff inside out. This guy was a race car builder. So I brought Frank out to be the chief engineer on our boats. And the deal was, Frank, you come out, you go on the boats, and we'll take perfectly good care of you. But you got to be my eyes and ears, because I'm not going to be there. I got to go get the trucking and a whole lot to do. So Frank came out and he went up there. The third phone call. So Frank went and lived with the guy who brought me into the deal, the guy I grew up with from Newfoundland, and the captain, Tony, the main captain, the family man. So he called me twice complaining about the guy, the guy that brought me in, showing up at the house at 2 in the morning in limos and hookers and the whole fucking cocaine bullshit, right? And we were paying him. We had him on salary, so he was acting like a pimp. So the third time he called me, he said, Brian, I'm not staying. I'm leaving. I can't stay anymore. I said, Frank, just stay. I'm coming up. I'll come up today. So I got a couple of guys, and we flew up there, and we sat that guy down and said, you got to go. I'm not fucking going. Oh, you're going. You're going. Or you're getting nothing. You make the call. So you make the call. If you're not going, you're not going. But we're here to tell you that you are going. When we call you, you'll come back. And you will get what's yours. We will not rip you off. We do not do that. But you got to go. He fucking hated it, but he left. Of course he left. So we bring in the first part of the load. We got 25 tons came in.
And this is all on a fishing boat?
Came over on a Chinese boat from Vietnam. And we had two. I bought a new boat, 100-foot tender vessel that was a fish carrying vessel. Right. And it used to pack herring and salmon and halibut for fishermen in Alaska and bring it to Washington. So I bought this in Seattle, brought it up there with our fishing boat that the family had, a 60-foot fishing boat. So now we had 2 boats up there. Got the first part of the load, repackaged it in our own packages, our own boxes, or made it look like fish boxes, brought it in, loaded up the tractor trailers down at the offload. It was amazing. Got it all in, got it California, then New York, started selling it, and everything was going amazing. And the guy shows up in town because someone in town told him that the crew was back and everybody was having a good time. So he showed up looking for his. So we knew we're not even halfway done yet, right? We got this product over there that has to be picked up, brought over, and sold to deal with yet. So how do we deal with this guy? Because, you know, with a little bit of money, this guy's crazy. He's hookers and limos and fucking pimping, and, you know, it's the whole 9 yards that gets everyone in trouble. So we had to give him something, though. And we had kind of a democracy at the top of our group, right? Right. The boys wanted to give him 50 grand. I said, that is the biggest fucking mistake we'll ever make. You got to do better than that. It got to go over 6 figures somehow. And if we got to send a babysitter with the money to sit with him, but if you give him 50 grand, he's not going to like it. And the vote was 50 grand. So we brought him a Vaughn's supermarket bag with 50 grand in it. He took that bag of 50 grand from us, left the meeting, and went straight to the DEA's office and put that 50 grand on the table and told them a story.
Okay.
So from that point, for the next 11 months, they fucking watched everything. But, okay, we didn't know this. We went and got a new boat, 160-foot oil supply vessel. We built we built a shelter deck. We built a Marco longline system on it. I mean, we spent $1 million turning this into a fish killing machine. And, but we were going to use it further because we had big load to put on that boat and the other boat. So we go up, the boat comes over from China, from the South China Sea. We meet it in the Bering Sea, take everything off of it, go up into a fjord in Alaska, throw tarps over our boats and cover it with trees so that if you're flying over, it just looks like woods, and start repackaging everything. Now, up until this point, we all had scanners, all of the guys, right? But we could never get any of the feds scanning information. We could listen to the local cops and all this, but we couldn't listen to any of the feds. Well, just before we were going to bring the load down, we brought a guy in from San Diego who was about to go to prison, but he had a spectrum analyzer that could isolate the Fed's transmission frequencies. And he isolated the DEA, the FBI, the ATF, all of the Fed's transmission frequencies we now had. So all of us programmed our scanners with all these new freaks. So the load's ready to come down from Alaska. We fly 2 of the captains. We had 3 boats up there now. So we fly 2 of the captains down, the lead captain, Tony, and Bobby Mack, another captain who has since died. Peace and blessings be upon him. He drowned saving a crew member. So Bobby comes down, Tony comes down. I pick him up at the airport in my Suburban, and I'm driving from Seattle to Anacortes, 90 miles up the highway. Halfway up, my scanner lights up with the cops talking about following me in the Suburban. I fucking freak we all freak out. And I just boot it. I took off, buddy, and I just kept driving. I drove for about 6 hours. It drove till I was out of gas. And we're just freaking in a fucking panic, you know? And in these are the days of pay phones.
Right.
So 6 hours later, I pull in. I'm in Spokane now. I went from the fucking coast to the east coast of Washington, and I pull into a payphone and I call our safe house in Seattle. And she says, "You're the 4th follow today? Call back in an hour. We're arranging a meeting." So I call back in an hour. We had a meeting set up, and we all met at this countryside store the next day. In the meantime, partners called a lawyer in LA and got a private detective to go to work for us immediately. This private detective used to be a DEA agent. So when we met the next day at the little store, there's probably 8 of us standing around. DEA agent, guy named Steve Swanson. And here's what we learned. Ultimately, this is what we learned. We knew that they knew, but they didn't know that we knew they knew. Okay. We can pull this fucking thing off. We know they know, but they don't know we know they know. So we can orchestrate something for them to look at. Steve, in his part of his report, was they're flying up and down the inside passage nonstop looking for your boats. They're waiting at your offload. There are 100 agents poised to hit everything. They know you got the load. So we go get a ship from a friend of mine no one knows anything about. We fucking jam up to the fjord in Alaska. We take all the pot off of those boats and we come jamming straight back down. On the way down, we pull our other boats out into the open from the fjord, the boats that had the product on it but no longer do, and the fucking radios light up. We got them. We're on them. We're on them. Okay, and we're listening to them say, don't touch them till they cross the inside passage border from Canada to the U.S. Let them get all the way down. The moment they cross the border, we're taking them. We come down with the other ship. We go into Bellingham. We didn't go to our offload. We went into downtown Bellingham. The University of Washington's in Bellingham. It's in front of God and everybody, buddy. We offloaded that ship from 6 in the morning to 11 o'clock in the morning to get all of that product off there. It looked like fish we were offloading the whole time. People would come by and watch us, and we'd give them a fish, and just business as usual. At 11 o'clock, when everything was gone and everything was on its way to California, and it was the moment everything got out of Washington, we brought the boats down and started sailing down. In that process that we're listening to them watch us, we finally get everything stored in our warehouses in California, getting ready for distribution out to New York and the rest of the country. So we're talking a lot of pot here, okay? The moment we cross the border, they fell out of the sky, airplanes, seaplanes, helicopters, Coast Guard, Navy, ATF, FBI, DEA, I mean, everywhere. And there was fresh donuts and coffee on all of our boats. There wasn't a fucking cigarette paper on the boats. They freaked the fuck out.
Oh.
So I knew, that wasn't the end of it. It was a little while after that I got sober. I started snorting coke again after that, I went right back to the bag and got way out of control. I had too much money and not enough brains. And finally, on the eve of my 40th birthday, August 31st, 1988, I had a heart attack from an overdose. And that got my attention. So my 40th birthday was my first sober day. That was 33 years ago. I haven't looked back.
So after you guys successfully moved, it was 50 tons on the second load, right?
Yeah.
And so you guys cleared what, close to 200 million?
On the whole thing, it was 200 something million thereabouts.
Wow. That's a lot. So after that, were you done?
110 people working for you, and everybody wants $1 million. It's not a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, not everybody got $1 million, but you know what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah. It's a lot of
big payroll.
A lot of people had their hands out. So yeah, it might.
Oh, you got investors that are expecting 5 to 1 on their money.
Right.
You got all that. It's expensive.
Yeah. Now,
Excuse me.
was that your exit? Were you kind of like, all right, I'm done, or was you still kind of doing
When I
stuff?
got sober, that was it.
Okay, you're done.
I wasn't. I wasn't thinking anything. You know, it was an end of an era, and everyone involved in the deal, once the cops got onto us, knew the era was over. This was an era that began in the 70s that ended with this bust.
Right.
And with this bust, and at that very moment in time, they took down the entire Southeast Asia connection. There were 4 major players over there, of which we were one. And we were called the biggest in the world by the DEA. But they shut them all down at once.
Right.
And so there was no more premium pot in the country. They, by that action, created the new American cannabis industry. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because Americans say, oh, you're going to not let us get that shit over there? Well, we're going to grow it, and we are going to make it so much better because we're Americans, and that's what we do. And that's what happened to the pot business. It got attention paid to it in a very big way.
Absolutely.
By Americans, for Americans, in America.
It's definitely still blowing up today, as we'll get
Huge.
into. So this is what, around 92. You're actually a drug counselor, or a counselor at a drug rehab at this time, right? 92.
I got sober in 88, and I stayed at the hospital working as a volunteer, and I eventually became a counselor and became the head counselor at the hospital. And I did a group every Tuesday night for drug addicts and alcoholics.
Right. But around this time is kind of where your past, I guess, catches up with you, so to speak.
Yeah, look, I knew the moment when we fucked with the DEA and put all that egg on their face.
Yeah,
They're not letting you get away with that shit, buddy.
No.
They're coming someday. They're coming to talk to you.
Absolutely.
I knew that was going to happen. But you know what? When I got sober, the way I felt about my life completely changed. And I felt free for the first time in my life, period. I knew that there was a hammer about to fall somewhere, but it didn't bother me. I just was free. I felt amazing. And so I loved my life. And, you know, a couple of years into it, I'm lying in bed one morning and a knock comes on the door. And, you know, I didn't even have to roll over to look out to see who was there, to know who was at my door.
Yeah, that knock is usually pretty distinctive too.
I knew this was the cops. I knew it. And I rolled over and I looked and I could see through the mini blinds. There was a door out on my deck. I could see a gun in a hand. And I don't know anyone with guns. So it had to be the cops.
Right.
So I opened the door and there were these 2 cops standing there, and badges, one hand, guns in the other. Are you Brian O'Day? And I said, man, I wish I wasn't, but I am. And they said, do you have any guns? And I said, no, I don't. Maybe we come in? I said, you have the gun. Of course you can come in. So they said, do you mind if we bring some friends? And I said, knock yourself out. Next thing you know, there were 8 of them tearing my place apart.
Jeez. Now, did they just build a case on you over time?
Pardon?
Did they just build a case on you over time, or did they just?
Yeah, they started hitting. So we had 3 boats with a lot of crew.
Right.
And a lot of the crew were kids,
Okay.
20, 21, 23. And the cops go to those kids and they got 75 grand, 100 grand for doing whatever they did. And the cops, you see, one of the, Tony's brother-in-law was in the fucking FBI, you know? So, and they all knew. And so they went to these kids, and 2 of his kids were in the deal.
Oh.
And they said, here's the deal. You're getting 30 fucking years. 30. And this is the time when they were given these thrilling sentences, right? So you turn over all that fucking money right now. Go get that money and turn it over, and you give up everything you fucking know, and I'll see that you don't go to jail. So that's what they did. They went and knocked the crew off one by one, all the younger guys. And it, eventually everybody cooperated, including all the big guys except me and Frank, my chief engineer that I brought out from Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
He and I were the only two people that kept our mouths shut. And I had another friend of mine who was my corporate front who said, I'll keep my mouth shut. You tell me what to do. You want me to keep, I won't say anything. And I said, Barry, you tell him everything you fucking know. Make it work for yourself. Make it work for yourself. Because you can't tell him anything that someone else hasn't already told him, okay? So you just go make it work for yourself. He didn't go to jail. Oh. Frank, my other guy, I said the same thing to him. He said, I ain't fucking talking to those guys ever. I said, okay. So Frank got 5 years, I got 10.
Wow. Now, where did you have to serve those 10?
Buddy, I got the deal of deals. The DA, the district attorney, eventually got to love me because he got 100 letters from people in the community saying, what the fuck are you doing? Here's a guy who's working with drug addicts and alcoholics in our community that's made a fucking tremendous difference in our community, and you want to send them away to prison for 10, 20, 30 years. You got to be kidding. So 100 letters plus went out from the community to the president, the vice president, the solicitor general, to everyone in the country, 17 different individuals. Right. And the DA initially thought that I was full of shit. But eventually he got it, this is who I am, and I'm not talking. I'm sorry. I got nothing to say about anyone else. Well, I did it. I did. But don't ask me to tell you about anybody else. I got nothing to say. And everybody else talked except me and Frank, okay? He fucking loved me for not talking. So he wrote me and said, hey, I can't make your sentence any less because you wouldn't cooperate. What I can do is see that you get out of here. So I'm recommending your transfer. And that's what he did. And I got transferred to Canada. And in Canada, you can get out after serving a sixth of your time.
Right.
Not violent crime. Well, I didn't. I served 2 years. And then I served another 2 years in the halfway house. Okay. And then the rest on parole. And then 4 on probation after that.
So, I mean, definitely a lot better outcome than it probably could have been.
Oh, totally. In the U.S., it's, you do 85% of your time.
Right.
You do 8.5 days on every 10 that you're sentenced to. It's a brutal fucking regime.
Now, were the prisons in Canada, how are they compared to the prisons in the U.S.? Was it
much more violent?
Much more violent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Talking federally.
Right.
On a state level, state prisons are pretty friggin' scary.
Right.
I don't know if you ever seen a movie called American Me.
Yes.
Okay. So I almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it cost him a couple of $1 million to stay alive after making that movie.
Yeah.
So I made the mistake of watching that movie before I went inside, and that freaked me the fuck out.
Yeah, that's not a good one to watch before you go in.
No, but that's what state prisons are like. Federal prisons aren't like that in the U.S. They're very controlled, very militaristic, very regimented. In Canada, all the guys in prison are called the guards by their first name. No one has any respect. I mean, they don't give a shit. Guys walking around eating 50, 60 Valium at a time. Everybody smoking hash. And I became the chairman of the inmate committee there, which was a crazy thing to do. I had to please the administration and the inmates. It was impossible. And, violence like crazy. And, at a certain point there, my life got in jeopardy because of an involvement with something that related to the inmate committee. And, I don't know how much longer I would have lasted in there, but I got out very shortly after that to the halfway house.
That's good.
Where I spent the next 2 years.
Yeah, you had touched on it earlier. I think there was a rumor that the Mexican mafia, the Lame, had a hit out on almost for participating in that film. And
they did.
Yeah.
They absolutely did.
Wow. Okay, so when you get out, you go back to Canada. Is that right?
I got transferred to Canada to serve the remainder of my time. And I went to a prison in Nova Scotia called Spring Hill. And when I got paroled to Newfoundland because that's where I'm from.
Right.
And there were no federal prisons in Newfoundland. So I got out of Spring Hill, hopped on a plane, went down to Newfoundland, moved into a halfway house. And halfway house actually was next to the first house I ever sold pot out of. Crazy.
And not long after that, you start kind of working with some hip hop artists and stuff in the TV and the music industry too, don't you? Don't you have some involvement in that?
That's quite a while later. I got through in Newfoundland, got through the halfway house thing. My wife was a clothing designer, so she flew up to Toronto and got a job as a designer for a major Canadian women's clothing manufacturer. She's a knitwear designer. And I came up and started, so what happened was this. I had a little money in the market and I was losing money like crazy. And my wife said to me, you got to get a job. And I said, get a job? Who the fuck's going to hire me? I've never had a job. Well, I got no resume. I got nothing. And she said, oh, let's see. You had 110 people working in your group all around the world in secret, and you pulled off a $250 million deal in secret, and you don't know how to do anything. Really? Really?
She got a point.
Why don't you sit down there and write a resume and look at the qualifications that made it possible for you to do that job and put it in the form of a resume and see what it looks like? So I sat down and I went, oh God, yeah, right. I'm going to get a job with this, all right. And it occurred to me, the last one, I didn't tell him what it was. And I just said, I want to put an ad. I want it on page 3, right in the middle of the page, 4 inches by 2 inches. And they said, send us the copy. This was in a national newspaper in Canada. And it called the Financial Post. Mm-hmm. So I sent the copy. And 2 minutes later, my phone rang, of course. Oh, hi, Mr. O'Day. I said, well, you don't want to take the ad now because you read the copy? He said, no.
Brian, we're having a little technical difficulty here. I lost you for a second.
There you are.
Okay. Yeah, you're back now. So
okay. So where did I lose you?
You said you had got a phone call from the.
So the newspaper called me and said, okay, you can, for $1,300, get a one-time insert, page 3, middle of the page. Yeah, we can do that. That same $1,300, I can put you in the Financial Times classified ad section. Hear me out, he said. I guarantee you could put this ad on the back page, at the lower corner, hide it anywhere in the paper. You are going to get so much noise from this ad. I'm telling you, give it 7 days in the Financial Times classified section. You will be surprised what will happen. And it'll only cost you the same amount of money. So I said, sure. So the ad was headlined, former marijuana smuggler, having recently completed a 10-year sentence for importing 75 tons of marijuana in the United States. I'm now seeking a legal means to support my family. I'm an expert in all levels of security. I'm an expert in logistics. I speak 3 languages. I'm a computer expert, etc. Recommendations, the district attorney who prosecuted me, and so on and so on. So I got 650 responses from all over the world by mail, not email, by mail. Every police agency in the country offered me a job in the US. The ad went all over the world. George Lois, who Mad Men, George Lois is the original Mad Men, who the series designed after George Lois. Mm-hmm. George Lois wrote me a letter and he said, that is the best ad ever written in the history of ads. So from him, that's extraordinary.
Oh, absolutely.
Anyway, as a result, I ended up as a guest on a late night talk show, a show like David Letterman, something like that. And I met an actor on that show. The next day, I'm at my Starbucks in the beach where I live in Toronto, and there's that actor standing right there. And I said, what the heck are the chances of this? He said, I'm here every day. I said, me too. I've never seen you before, though. Anyway, got to talking. He has a friend coming from LA that's done a pilot on a show. And he wondered if I knew anyone at the networks that we could pitch it to. Surprisingly, I did. I had a friend at one of the networks who was a mocker, who was a big shot there. So I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. So they showed up at my house the next day, gave me a copy of the show that they had shot a pilot on. I sent it up to my friend at the network, and damn it if we didn't get a show. And I knew nothing about producing TV. So the show was called Creepy Canada. It was eventually sold around the world as Creepy. It was a travelogue for X-Files fans, basically, a paranormal travel show. It was the first. I wrote it, hosted it, produced it, paid for it, lost my shirt on it, lost my marriage on it. I mean, it was fucking the best and the worst thing that ever happened. And then, you know, after that, I did a few other things in TV. And the last thing I did was a show with Kevin O'Leary called Redemption, Inc., which was, you know, basically the apprentice for ex-cons. Right. And one of them wins Kevin O'Leary as their business partner. Yeah. I co-hosted and was a producer on that show as well.
Yeah, I seen that. That was pretty cool. Wow, so that's definitely opened some. I mean, even though the situation was what it was, getting out, that still was able to open doors for you because you made it work for you. You take the—
my friend, there's a saying, there is a line from the Bhagavad Gita. What was once a cup of sorrow is now eternal wine. Okay, so it was a cup of sorrow, but it turned into eternal wine. Listen, the greatest gifts I have ever gotten in my life, Chip, I would have turned them down. I would have turned them down had I been given the opportunity. They only are gifts as I see them retrospectively now. Like that 10-year prison sentence, I would have said, no fucking thank you. Thank you, but no. That 10-year prison sentence sent me back to Newfoundland, where I never would have gone. It reintroduced me to my brothers and my sisters in a way that I never would have connected with them. I wouldn't have happened without. It connected me with my mother and father before they died. Never would have happened without. That book got written while I was in prison. This book right here, look, Random House, Other Press. You know, it happened there. So there are the great gifts that I would have turned down. Hey, look at that. Gee. Yeah. So, you know, so many good things happen when I leave my mind out of it. So all I'm trying to get to is this. I spent my whole life looking for another moment to get in without realizing that the present is not called the present for nothing. It is the gift that contains everything I need, everything. There is only 2 days that don't contain anything for me, and that's tomorrow and yesterday. Everything is here now, period. It is the present. It's here, it's now. So this is it. And here we are.
Absolutely.
And life goes on, and I'm somehow surviving.
That's some powerful stuff, man. And it's definitely a way to look at things. And here to speak on that today, how does it make you feel that, you know, the effort and the time and the money that they spent putting guys like you and other people, you know, into jail for something that now is probably pretty soon going to be legalized all over, but it's already starting to be legalized in a few states, and, you know, it's
fully legal in Canada.
Fully legal in Canada now?
Fully. I just got a flyer from one pot shop. They now have 100 locations in Canada. And, you know, one shop. There are now thousands of them.
Right.
And it's everywhere. And you can smoke pot anywhere that you could smoke cigarettes. So like people standing outside buildings on their smoke break, there are people smoking cigarettes and smoking joints.
Wow.
The parks, you can't walk around this town. There's pot, you smell it everywhere. So it's, so how do I feel? Here's the problem I have with it all. Legally, fucking right. Never should have been illegal. Never should have been. It was made illegal on a racist play to deminimize black people and Spanish Mexican people. That's why it was made illegal. It was made illegal based on a pack of lies developed by the DuPonts and the Hearsts through their party house family member, Anslinger, who was the drug czar. He was a nephew of the DuPont family. So they created these drug laws around pot because of pulp and paper. They wanted pulp and paper. They wanted the tree timber industry to create the paper, whereas the hemp industry was its competitor. This killed the hemp industry. And that was the plan. So it was made illegal from a lie. Then they chased us around and spent fucking millions of dollars, trillions of dollars on their so-called drug war, locking us up. Then they go ahead and legalize it in this country. And what do? There were kids, I'm not talking about me now, I'm talking about young people who stood on the front line in Canada and opened illegal shops across the country and stood in their illegal shops out front and let the cops come raid them. And then they go right back and open them again and stood right there and let them come back and raid them again. And they kept doing it and kept doing it. And finally it got legalized. Did they go back to those kids who stood on the front line and said, no, this is not right? No, they didn't. They gave it to corporate Canada, and the guy they put in fucking charge of it is the cop who is the chief of police in Toronto who hounded people like me. So what? We are, forgive me, Indigenous people, the new Indian. You see, the Indigenous people had a great enterprise in this country, and the white people came over and fucking took it from them. And the people who sent over the people to take it from them gave it to the people who took it from them. That's what they did with the pot business too. They stole the business from us and gave it to the people who stole it from us. So, how do I feel about it? I'm glad it's legal, but the way they did it was like, just like everything else they fucking do. Okay? Just like everything else they do.
So we share the exact same thought processes on that for sure. Well, I mean, you've got a hell of a story, man. And as we showed earlier, you have a book also. You want to tell us where they can grab that?
You can get this, like I'll tell you, I'm going to give a shout out to my favorite bookstore on the planet Earth, and that's Chaucer's Bookstore in Santa Barbara, California. This book came out in 2007, I think, something like that. That bookstore has carried this book ever since it came out. And so Chaucer's Bookstore, Santa Barbara, California, they'll sell it to you online. But other than that, Amazon, wherever you get books, you just type in "Hi, Confessions of an International Drug Smuggler."
Yeah, I think when I bought it, it was in 2010, and I looked the other day because now Audible has become a big thing for people that don't like to sit down and actually read the physical book. They have someone read it to you, and it's actually on Audible also now. I've seen
it is, but you know what? I wanted to read the book myself.
Right. I was hoping that was you that was going to be on there. When I clicked the sample and realized it wasn't you, I was like, that just killed it for me.
Oh, and it killed it for me. I can't listen to the Audible. I think it's terrible, you know, because you got to inflect. Right. The way that a lot of that dialogue is written in there, it was written as it sounded to me.
Yes.
And so unless you're inflecting right, you're going to miss it. Excuse me. Anyway, but, you know, I'm thankful. What can I say? I'm grateful. I'm alive. I've got 4 gorgeous kids. I got 3 amazing mothers of my 4 children. And I've got great relationships with all of them. And I thank them for that. You know, they put up with so much from me and still reel me back. So, you know, my life is a blessing. I've got great brothers and sisters who have never discarded me, never subtracted me. and always included me in their lives. And I'm a lucky guy. I'm a lucky guy.
A lucky guy, interesting guy. Um, Definitely an amazing story. Listen, I'm glad we could get you on here. I want to get this story out here to as many people as possible, because one reason why I started this podcast is I would watch a lot of TV. And like I said, I seen your story. I think the first time was on a show called Masterminds.
Right.
I
So
would
Smuggler
go,
Supreme.
yeah, I would go and I would tell people that I work with, like, man, you got to watch this show. I seen the one about this guy or that guy. And I'm just like, I'm telling a few people, well, why not just get on something like this? And I can tell a whole lot more people that'll bring exposure, that'll, let them see a little bit of what's going on here, and get the behind the scenes like you just laid out for us here. So we appreciate you coming on the show, man. Fantastic interview. I think this is going to do very well. And we want to wish you luck in any future endeavors you have going on, any plans you have of putting anything together. I know you spoke of you and your daughter have a thing right now in California trying to help ex-cons, trying to get, back into the flow of things. I think that's wonderful.
She's been doing that for a bunch of years, and she's finally pulling all of the right things together and making it work. And I'm working on my permanent residency down there so I can go down and help her full time.
That's good, man. That's great stuff. Well, like I said, Mr. O'Day, we want to thank you for coming on the show. It was
One time, call me Brian, will you? Call me Brian. Come on.
You did tell me that. You told me that. Brian, we appreciate it, my friend. Fantastic interview. And all our listeners out there, please go ahead. If you want to get his book off Amazon, get the Audible version, go ahead and find out a little bit more about Brian's story here. And we appreciate you guys joining in. And remember, if you can't be good at it.